Okay, so I'll go ahead and begin. Hi, everyone. My name is Ryan Shripat. I'm a developer in the SSG group at Telios Systems Limited. I've been working here for about 15 years now, and I'm very, very pleased to have the opportunity from HackTT to do this presentation on etiquette and tools for working in a remote first environment. Shall I begin?
Please do.
Okay. Great. So as I mentioned, I've been working here for about 15 years, and I have the I have the tremendous advantage of being able to work remotely a couple of times per week. Most recently for this semester, I've been working from home on every Friday. So I can speak firsthand as to the trials and tribulations and benefits and downsides of being a remote worker in 2019. Uh, so let's get in. So the title referred to remote first workers, right? So we're all familiar with. Let me hang on one. Let me just adjust some of my screen here. Right. So we're all familiar with the concept of remote workers and having remote workers in your organization. You've either been a remote worker yourself, or you've been made to interact with someone who is a remote worker. And you'd notice some obvious downsides to having to interact with a remote worker. So with the remote first idea is really just an attempt to balance the scale a little bit, because it's obviously a lot easier for five people in the same physical office to meet and interact than it is for these same folks to communicate across continents and time zones and so on. So the remote first movement is just an attempt to equalize things, right? So there are obvious hurdles to working remotely and dealing with remote workers. We're just trying to shift it a little bit to one side to more embrace remote workers, because you don't need to convince anyone that it's better to be physically there, right? So why would you even pursue a remote first objective? Well, there are two main perspectives, one from the employer's perspective and the other from the employee's perspective. From the employer's perspective, he gets his pick of employees from all around the world. His selection of employees is not limited to one particular locality. So, for example, if you needed a C sharp developer with particular skills in a particular area, you didn't need to find that guy in Trinidad and Tobago. You could just as easily go and look for him in the Middle East or in Nigeria or in China, because the world that we're living in now, it allows you to do that. You don't have to limit yourself to the people who can physically get to your office. That's a big one for employers. So they can use the ability to work remotely as a perk. That's a definite perk for most people. Most people will consider that a perk. On top of your base salary, and the employer, in addition, I think most importantly, to me at least, um, they'll benefit a lot from the extra productivity you're going to get from your employees, right? The typical commute time in Trinidad, for example, is about 1 hour each way. Whether you're living in Diego Martin or you live in Arima, you're spending at least 1 hour traveling to work every day and 1 hour getting back home, right? That means you're spending 2 hours just doing non-productive things. I mean, you might want to fill up the time listening to podcasts and educating yourself in some way, form, or fashion, but the fact remains by the time you get to work, frequently you're going to be tired. So if your employees could just like roll out of bed, have breakfast, get to the bathroom, and start working, they're going to be a lot more productive and going to be less tired. So from the employee's perspective, again, you have saved time, so they're going to have a lot more time in their lives to pursue their own hobbies, to take their minds off work, or if they want, they can even take that time, that extra time in the day, to study something else that's relevant to the work that they do on a daily basis, right? When you're working from home as well, you have a lot more flexibility with, again, with the time. You can pop out to do something at lunch really easily. You can receive deliveries, you can receive repairmen when you're working at home. There's a lot of flexibility in there, obviously, as well. You're extremely comfortable. Don't want to get too comfortable, of course. And of course, from the employee's perspective, you can work anywhere in the world. You're not limited to working where you can reach, right? If you live in Icacos or Cedros, you don't have to worry about physically getting to the office in Port of Spain, right? You can work anywhere in the world, and I mean, I don't need to sell you guys too much on this. So obvious downsides to working from home. So in my office, they seem to have developed the habit of occasionally treating us with company breakfasts and pizza. If you're not in the office, don't worry, they'll live stream it for you. Uh, Obviously, that's not the best for most employees. But on a more serious note, you can get lonely. You can end up talking to yourself, can end up craving human contact. You can lose focus because you don't have other people around you to motivate you. You might find that your work isn't valued, right? And worse than that, you might be out of the loop with the work of a team, and you wouldn't be as effective a worker as you could be. You really, really do need to guard against this. And there's several things that you can do to improve this situation. For convenience, I've kind of separated these things into physical and cultural things. So, I mean, can anyone in the meeting now give me some idea of the downsides that they have had, that they have experienced as remote workers? I mean, I know you guys are students, but I'm guessing you guys have to interact with other people on your team as well.
For me, I worked for a time at a company that did medical transcription. So
Uh-huh.
most of our work was done remotely. The downside was um, sometimes lack of accountability. When you expect people to be on, they are not on
Mm.
doing their work. People think, sometimes family and friends think that because you're home, your time does not, you are not accountable for your time. And thirdly, employers sometimes think that you should be available 24/7. So
Mm.
those are the three areas that I actually experienced.
That's interesting. I happen to be hitting on
Ryan, you with us? Okay, everyone. It would appear that Ryan's connection might have been off for a bit. He may be back soon. So we just ask for patience.
admit Ryan back to the room. He's awaiting admission back to the room.
Richard? So is this? Hey guys, can you confirm that you're hearing me? All right, I see a chat. Okay, great. So this was perfection. All right. So let's get back to the presentation. So I mean, you guys can see my screen. Can anyone not see the screen yet? Let's make sure screen 2, share, and you guys should be seeing my screen now, right? Okay, great. So I mean, we were so ironically enough, we were talking about the downsides of remote working. So I normally work from home on Fridays, and I was admonished by my colleagues to make sure and come to the office today to deliver this presentation to ensure that I have the best internet connectivity. Well, it turns out that the internet just cut off twice for me here on this particular machine. So we'll roll with it. All right. So so several things you can do to improve the situation of or the plight of the remote worker. And for convenience, I've separated them into physical and cultural things. Right. So physically, most of you guys are coders from the perspective of coding, right? There's no substitute for having a physical dev machine with your IDE installed, with your code installed, and being able to run that code on that machine, right? If you have to run the code on a remote server, there's additional latency inside of there. Debugging becomes a hassle. There's no substitute from running. There's no substitute for running your entire stack on your local machine. I mean, it may be more convenient to do it in other ways, but the ideal is your local dev machine. So for example, my machine at work has my ID set up. I have Visual Studio set up there, my code, my deployment, development environment, and so on. And what I do from home, because my laptop at home is a little bit underpowered, is I remote into my machine at work. Now that brings a bunch of issues with it, and I always go back to wanting to have my own ID set up on my machine, right? Importantly, like I mean, just as important as electricity in 2019 would be your internet connection. You need to have good internet. Don't pay for cheap internet. Pay for the 30 megabits per second or the 50 megabits per second, or if fiber is available, pay for the fiber offering in your area. The internet is the most important thing you have, right? Even in the office here, if the internet were to cut off and we didn't switch to the backup fast enough, you kind of just stop working. So I can't underscore the importance of the internet, of having a good internet connection for the remote worker. Your own computer. So don't be like me and have an underpowered laptop at home. You need to have a proper computer, right? Make sure everything is on there and set up. You have high quality RAM, you have a fast hard drive, you have a good processor, a good GPU, big monitors, multiple monitors, a good keyboard, and a good mouse, right? Spend as much as you can on your computer because that is your bread and butter right there, right? So your audio video setup, we're gonna get into the video a little bit, but for your audio setup, you have some choices to make. You wanna go with a Bluetooth connectivity, or you wanna go with wired. If you're gonna go with Bluetooth connectivity, ensure that you have a backup for the Bluetooth headset, because Bluetooth is a little bit wonky sometimes. So make sure you have a wired headset on the side. The headset that you're using, is there an inbuilt mic? Are you using the inbuilt mic on the computer? Is there another mic that you can plug into the computer? You need to have backups of everything. We're gonna get to the word backup in a little while, right? If you're using a Bluetooth adapter and you don't have dedicated Bluetooth on the machine, make sure you plug the Bluetooth adapter into a dedicated port and not into a hub, for example. Again, on the physical thing, you want to ensure that you're in a well-lit room, because we're talking video here, right? So the thing about it is, there's no there, you lose a lot of communication in audio, right? If you skip the video portion of a call, you lose a lot of nuance, right? So if you're speaking to a room and someone disagrees with you, they may not do so vocally. They might do that with a slight twinge of the forehead. They might shake their head. You wouldn't pick that up if you didn't have that video insight into the room. And similarly, the people in the room need to be able to see you as well, and get context to what you're saying, and get some confidence in what you're saying, right? The video aspect of it it can't be underemphasized. Sorry, it can't be overemphasized, right? So as much as possible, if you're getting into a call or getting into a meeting with someone, you try to put your video on, right? If you're going to have the video on, make sure you're in a well-lit room. Make sure you have an appropriate background. Some conferencing software, including Zoom, has the ability to set a background to avoid distractions. You don't want people in the room getting distracted by your cat jumping on your lap, or the billowing curtains in your background, or the fishman on the road next door. Well, no, you wouldn't see that, but you get the idea here. You really want to keep the background clear, well-lit room, and especially for us folks in Trinidad, you really want to have some light directed on your face. Not sure how well these webcams are for Caribbean people. You want to have good clothes on. You want to have proper clothing on. We'll get more into the clothing a little bit later, but I mean, wear something that is presentable. Don't wear something that you wouldn't go to a customer meeting with, right? So if your normal home attire is a round neck T-shirt, and you know that you would never ever go to a customer with that particular T-shirt on, don't do it. Wear a shirt, wear a professional looking polo, right? Try to look professional so that you can get the respect of the people you're speaking to all of the time. So in addition to that, it puts you in a certain frame of mind to deal with the work that you're going to do. You're not at home in that sense, right? We spoke about the background already, and backup. So backup. So everything needs a backup. Your machine needs a backup, right? If your machine is down and you're living in Cedros and you can't get to work in Port of Spain, then you're screwed unless you have another machine. It's a good idea to have another machine. It might not be your machine. It might be your girlfriend's machine, your wife's machine, your neighbor's machine, right? But see to it that you have one available, right? Backup for your internet. One of our employees, who lives in Siparia, he, in addition to his normal Flow connection, he has B-Mobile 4G internet, right? So on the rare occasion when the Flow connection goes down, he's able to use his mobile tethering hotspot situation to get online and continue doing his work. So you need backups like that. Sometimes the backups will fail. So for example, one of my backups is to go to my sister-in-law on the same street and use her internet. Well, that doesn't work out so well when you both share the same ISP and the ISP has failed in the area, right? But the point is there. What you could use rituals, for example, or even a Starbucks, and try to get to a location like that. But you need to plan your backups well in advance. So today, just now, I mean, we had backups. I had multiple backups and multiple failures to test these backups, right? My initial thing was to use my machine, my normal desktop machine at work. That wasn't working out. I set up on another laptop in another room. That didn't work out. Third laptop, internet connectivity issues, but we still had a backup for that. We brought that to another location and ended up using a wired internet connection, a wired Ethernet connection to be able to get online, right? So everything you do, you absolutely need to ensure that you have a backup for these things, right? Think about it. You need to plan for it. You can't just expect that, well, in the back of your mind, well, I could always ask a neighbor. Let them know beforehand that you might want to use their Wi-Fi one day. So this is an example of Zoom with the custom background. You can set a plain background. I haven't done it this time because I have a plain background here. So we could get into some of the more behavioral aspects of the thing, right? So you really want to lock the door. That reminds me. Right. So you really want to lock the door in your house, but beyond locking your door, you need to have an agreement with everyone else in the house about when they can bother you and when they can't bother you, right? So regardless of whether or not you're in a meeting, if you're deep inside of code, the other persons in your house, they need to respect that you're doing work, because if you're deep inside of a piece of code, you absolutely don't want an interruption from a family member, right? Try separating your rooms. Try having a separate room for your work, right? And try having a lock on the door so that no one else can get in. I mean, you can have your phone and let them interrupt you. That way you can manage that interruption better than a physical interruption, right? So that's a behavioral thing. You need to talk to the people around you to deal with that, right? You want to separate your work room from your home room, quite apart from the interruption aspect of it. You need to separate these two because when you need to be in a mode for work when required, and you need to be out of the work mode when you're done working, right? Otherwise, everything will be in a muddle and your mind will never rest, and you need that rest to be able to work effectively in the first place, right? So the first part is obvious. If your workroom is your bedroom and you sleep in the bedroom and you watch TV in the bedroom, then it doesn't feel like being in the work mode if you also try to do work in there, right? So that is something you want to try to do. Try to separate it, right? So moving on from that, the work that you do, you absolutely need to be able to track it. Always track the work that you do, right? I mean, whether you were working remotely or in office, you needed to be able to track your work anyway to be able to measure the profitability of what you've done. You don't want to bid 5,000 TT for a project and realize that you've spent 20,000 TT in terms of time, right? So you need to be able to track this. So this becomes especially important for the remote worker because the default assumption is that the remote worker is having a time, having fun, and not actually doing anything useful inside there, right? So you absolutely need to track your work, right? Oh, I had an entire slide for this. Working in the open, right? So you guys would be familiar with some of the tools that I myself use. So Slack, Microsoft Teams, Google Hangouts, yeah, that tools like that enable teams to work out in the open, right? So the thing is it's not only for the team to know that you are doing work and what work you're doing, but it's more from a documentation perspective as well. So when everyone has sight of what is being done on a project, you have inbuilt searchable documentation. How many of you guys use Slack? Nobody? Well, that's unfortunate. It would be cool if you guys tried Slack out. It's pretty cool. If you don't have Slack, you could try Microsoft Teams. I'm not sure if I'm seeing the chat view at all here right now. Okay, all right, that's fine. All right, so I'm not sure if you guys are trying to communicate with me at the moment. Right, so I recommend Slack, even though it seems to hog a lot of memory, because you can communicate out in the open. Microsoft Teams, if you have an Office subscription, comes free with the Office subscription, right? So you want to go with communication, let people know you're doing work and have any documentation there, all right? So from that,
People.
sorry? Hello?
Oh, no, please continue. I just had to meet somebody.
Okay, sure, no problem. All right, so I'll show you guys a video you might be pretty much familiar with. We don't really need the audio in it, but we could just narrate it as it goes.
All the time. The question is how democracy.
So this guy was on BBC Live, and we'll go back a little bit here. Here he was, office setup, everything, books, shelves, everything. And then what did he do? He forgot to lock his door, and his daughter came right in, right? Happy little child. And unfortunately, you see what's happening here now. It completely derailed the interview that he had. I mean, quite apart from becoming a viral sensation, this particular interview was completely messed up there. So we've seen a couple things here. Although he paid particular attention to setting up his background, even down to the bed with the books on it, that looked like a table, he forgot one key thing, which was to lock that door. Now, this is really important. You really want to be a professional when you're presenting yourself to your colleagues and and especially so your customers. So this video was very useful for me as a remote worker. It kind of opened my eyes to the importance of some of these things, right? So let's go into the etiquette for your fellow workers. So sometimes you might have you might have colleagues who are also who are not also remote workers, who happen to be stationed in the office itself, right? Now, what they do impacts greatly on how you are perceived, right? And we have to kind of control for that. So one day you might be the office worker dealing with a remote worker, all right? So again, documentation, you're talking again, Microsoft Teams and Slack. You really need to make sure that the guys at the office aren't having private meetings where they don't write down what was said and note what was decided upon. They have to document it in some way, form, or fashion, right? And that way they include you. They need to include you in every meeting, right? So sometimes it's inevitable that you're going to have ad hoc meetings, and an issue might come up in the production build of your software, and all of a sudden, quick ad hoc meeting between the devs and the operations guys. Well, what you can do, call immediately. This needs to become habitual. Call the other guy, call the remote worker who is supposed to be on the team, right? And call them, put them on the phone, call them on Slack on your phone, Skype or Microsoft Teams or whatever on your phone, and get them into the meeting. you have to treat them with the same level of respect that you would other workers inside of your organization. You need to be wary of the meeting times you're setting up, especially if your remote worker is in a different time zone. I'll tell you, for example, we've had employees from Canada and as far as Nigeria, and you would have had to set up meetings appropriately. So 3 p.m. for you might be 11 p.m. for them. So you don't want to set up a 3 to 4 p.m. meeting for that remote worker. So be aware, be cognizant of the time zone that your remote workers are in. And in addition, you really, really want to give them advance notice for when they are in fact required to be there for a physical meeting, right? You don't just spring it on them and say, all right, at 10 o'clock today, we're gonna have a meeting in the Coroni conference room and expect them to be there. Then you'll have them hustling to come down the road. Let them know beforehand. It's just common courtesy, right? It can be a little bit more difficult to do, but there are things you can do for it. So for example, if you want to have ad hoc meetings like that, what we do at Telios, we've set up our meeting rooms with conferencing software and computers so that it becomes a little bit easier for us to include remote workers at the drop of a hat. This wasn't an overnight thing. It was something we've been trying to do for a while, and we're still not there completely. But for the most part, the rooms are well set up for including remote workers. And I would advise you try to do the same at your own company, right? You can encourage little tiny changes like, hey, can we have a mic for the room? Can we have a dedicated speaker for the room, or a dedicated monitor, or dedicated projector for the room, for example? You want to watch the jokes. So one of the jokes we used to have, what probably still do have here, would be when a remote worker suddenly appears in the office. Well, you say, wait, you still working here? And that might be funny the first 2 times, but then afterwards it becomes a little bit not so good. So it tends to diminish the role of the remote worker inside of the organization. So you really want to watch the types of jokes you make about their being there physically or not. Right. I just mentioned tooling for the ad hoc meetings. So again, setting up your meeting rooms, etc., with the appropriate time zone and so on. So that brings me to the end there. So we dealt with, from the start, we dealt with what is a remote first environment. We talked a little bit about why we would want to have a remote first environment. Some of the downsides of having a remote first environment from the employee's perspective, from the employer's perspective, the benefits from the employer's perspective and the employee's perspective. And we dealt with some physical things for kind of dealing with those downsides, and some behavioral / cultural things for dealing with it as well. And I'm pretty interested to get some feedback from you guys. I know you're still students for the most part, so I know you might not have too much experience being remote workers, but I'm still interested to hear more about your experience. In this session. So this awkward pause becomes a little more awkward because I'm on the video. But if anyone has any experiences they'd like to share with respect to their own remote experience, that would be nice. Have you guys had it? Have you guys had remote experience?
For me, Keith, by the way, I have had experience in terms of, as I said, working with a medical transcription company and also Just about a little over a year ago, I was also responsible for assisting in setting up one of the organizers of a conference that was held in another one of the islands in Grenada. And a lot of the team that was working in terms of doing the planning and so on, we had no choice but to meet because of how many of us from how many different islands. We had to meet using online methods. And it pointed out to us how much personal responsibility you had to take, how much personal discipline you were required to take to be that remote worker, to do this sort of thing and to make sure that your event came off well.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. There definitely is an overhead to being a remote worker. But I mean, I'm pretty sure you would agree. You're willing to take in that overhead because of all the benefits that you get from it. But yeah.
Most certainly, that was one of the reasons why I selected this as a area of study and career.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Is anyone not in IT and programming? Because I'm interested to hear the perspective of non-coders as well. No, I guess most of you guys are coders, either shy or coders, or both shy and coders.
Can you hear me?
I can.
Okay. So I'm Winston. I'm one, not a student. Two, I didn't start off with a coding background, but had to work with coders for the purpose of delivering projects.
Mm-hmm.
And one thing that came across in that real life experience working with remote teams was the cultural differences.
Mm.
So I've had to work with programmers from Eastern Europe or Czech Republic, for example. Mm-hmm. And those guys are aggressive in starting the work. So you'll say, all right, this is what I want done. And they will say, I looked at the information, I started the work, here is what I have, you pay me money now? And hold on, not so fast. Tell me a little bit about yourself. Tell me about the experience. They don't, how they deal with personal relations is very different from how we do it in the Caribbean. I've also seen where they do things like screenshot their IDEs, their development environment every 10 minutes and just upload to a space, especially on platforms like Upwork. And they're showing you the progress that they have been making over a period of time. So you might be paying somebody by the hour and they run off those hours real quick. And so one has to be careful to establish the rules between especially international teams. You mentioned working with teams in Nigeria, and just the time zone differences. But can you also speak to cultural differences as well?
Well, the worker we had from Nigeria, his English was a little bit accented, and quite frequently we would have had to ask him to repeat himself. So that by itself was a little bit of a barrier. Actually, we had two guys from Nigeria, one who worked in Nigeria and one who actually came to our office. And culturally, they were fine. Culturally, they were fine. But it's interesting that in 2019, the technology now allows us to interact with these cultures in a way we never would have before, right?
Right.
So I mean, you wouldn't necessarily have had the opportunity to interact with the devs from the Czech Republic 5, 10 years ago without having to get your passport stamped and jump on a plane, right? And it is a beautiful thing that we now in this global scenario that we're in now, that we could do that. We could communicate with other people in that way and get exposed to other cultures. So interestingly about the point you made about them screenshotting the IDE. One of the things I neglected to mention was, I mean, use source control. When they're using source control effectively, you can actually see progress. So, I mean, for those guys, I would tell them, no, I don't want to see a screenshot of your IDE. I want to see your code committed. I want to see the commits in your Git repo. I want to see comments on your Git repo. I want to see the unit test passing. If a day passes and you don't have any commits into source control, then we might have a problem, right? So that's how you get to measure the progress. So that is kind of what I was referring to when I said that's working open. So I feel like they would have benefited from working more in the open like that rather than uploading a screenshot, which isn't too useful to us. I'm very happy that we have the opportunity to speak to people from other cultures. Sorry, I think I'll cut you off, Wilson.
Right. No, that's fine. I think it also presents the caveat that the way that we pay for talent changes and has to be established. So instead of hourly rates, we may be paying by milestones. So one commits code that passes unit tests and goes through the acceptance criteria for each sprint, for example, versus billing by the hour, indiscriminately.
Qualitative versus quantitative. That's a good approach. You wanna be wary of so certain pieces of work is a little bit more difficult to estimate for. So we might say to build a button to process the order, and initially our estimate might be 2 days. But only after getting into the code you realize that this thing is a lot more complicated than you initially thought, and it might actually end up taking a month. So that's one of the things you have to guard against when you're talking about milestone based payment. It's just keep an eye out for things like that.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay. All right. Well, that's it from me.
So guys, now this presentation, so there's a lot of stuff online for tips for working remotely and things like that. I mean, some people even have a robot going around the office with their face on the screen to try to get themselves included into conversations and so on. And this presentation has been based on my own personal experience. Your YMMV, your own mileage may vary. And this has served me well so far. So I'm very happy to impart some of my own experience to you, and I hope we can make remote working more acceptable in our local culture, because it is necessary now in the world that we live in.
And it certainly requires a lot more responsibility and discipline from us as remote workers. Again, as you pointed out, culture and so on has to be adjusted. But,
on both sides.
Yes, but certainly the flexibility that it allows us and the capability to respond, because sometimes, for example, again, from my personal experience, having provided some support to some of my special clients, my personal clients, sometimes they may call me at an odd hour, but it's a mission critical issue that I need to respond. How do I manage that without compromising my own family and that sort of thing? So these are, there's a lot of ground rules that you have to work out with your people and, establish clear boundaries, that sort of thing. But it is certainly a wonderful opportunity.
It's worth the effort.
Most definitely.
Okay. Any word from iGov TT?
Well, I don't know about iGov TT, but Hacker Hostel certainly we want to thank you for coming out, Ryan, and we do appreciate you taking the time to share your story. As the title indicates, etiquette and tools for working in a remote first environment. Is this the end of the presentation? Do you want to ask everybody a question?
No, I think I've given them something to think about. So I think we can end it off there. You're very welcome, and thank you so much for the opportunity to speak to you guys.
Okay, great. So everybody, the next session is on Monday at 9, and that is the competitor analysis and strategies for market defensibility, and that will be hosted by Hacker Hostel. Winston will be taking that session. So have yourself a great weekend, I should say, and we will see you on Monday.